the headlines tonight, Korea examines ways to help the U.S. in its fight against Islamic State militants as the group beheads another Western captive. The main opposition party faces more internal disarray as its interim chief is said to be considering not only stepping down but leaving the party altogether. And Asia's largest sporting event, the Asian Games, is set to kick off in South Korea this Friday, with North Korea taking part for the first time since 2002. These stories and more coming right up on Early Edition at 6. It's 6 p.m. on Monday, September 15th, here in Korea, live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. We begin with Korea's National Security Advisor Kwan-jin's trip to the United States.
He is now in Washington and will meet with his American counterpart Susan Rice. The two will talk about many issues, including providing aid to the U.S.-led fight against Islamic State militants.
Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
Speaking upon his arrival in Washington for a 4-day trip for talks with U.S. officials, Kwan-jin said Korea is looking at diverse ways, mostly in terms of humanitarian support, to help U.S.-led efforts to defeat Islamic State militants.
Korea has already provided some $1.2 million in aid for Iraqi refugees. I think Korea can look into giving some additional support.
When asked about the possibility of Korea joining in military action such as logistics support, Kim said the U.S. has yet to make an official request to Seoul. During his stay, Kim will meet with his American counterpart Susan Rice and other senior U.S. officials for discussions on a wide range of issues, including North Korea and the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Regarding the postponement of the transfer of wartime operation control from the U.S. to South Korea, Kim said talks will continue at an annual defense cooperation meeting set to be held next month in Washington. Seoul hopes to postpone the transfer by some 5 to 7 years from the currently set schedule of the end of 2015. When asked about the possibility of introducing the U.S. high-altitude missile defense system THAAD to South Korea, Kim said there have been no further discussions, nor had there been any agreement on the issue. Kim added the focus of his visit will be issues surrounding the Korean peninsula, including North Korea's nuclear and human rights issues, as well as American detainees in the north. Kim is scheduled to return to Seoul on Wednesday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And going back to Kim's remarks on the IS militants, the comments come as the group beheads another Western captive.
The victim is 44-year-old British national David Haines, who was in Syria to help people displaced by the month-long conflict in the region.
Our Shin Se-min has more.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has promised justice for murdered aid worker David Haines. At a meeting of the government's Emergency Response Committee on Sunday, Cameron said his murderers, those belonging to the Islamic State, were the embodiment of evil and precisely why Britain and the world needed to destroy them.
They are killing and slaughtering thousands of people, Muslims, Christians, minorities across Iraq and Syria. They claim to do this in the name of Islam. That is nonsense. Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters.
The beheading of the 44-year-old aid worker has increased the pressure on Cameron to counter the IS threat. This as they've threatened to take the life of another British national, Alan Henning. The international community is circling the wagons. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott pledged on Sunday to deploy 600 troops to the Middle East to aid the U.S.-led campaign against the terrorist group. He said the first set of 200 military personnel would arrive in the United Arab Emirates in the next couple of days. In response to the latest IS video release, U.S. President Barack Obama said America would stand shoulder to shoulder with England as part of the broad coalition of nations being formed to fight the militant group. Some 40 countries, including 10 Arab states, have so far offered their support in countering the threat. U.S. officials say that some of the Arab nations have even offered to join in airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And back here in Korea, the interim chief of the main opposition party may be on the verge of resigning. If that happens, it will bring about more disarray to the opposition, which has been missing a chairman figure for more than a month now. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Young-gil has this report.
Park Young-sun of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy doesn't just appear to be thinking about stepping down as interim chief. There are speculations she may even quit the party altogether. It comes amid pressure from within the main opposition bloc to step down both as the chief of its emergency committee and as its floor leader.
We've been urging floor leader Park Young-sun for her voluntary resignation. If she does not step down, we will have to put some pressure on her to do so.
The contention stems from Park's handling of a special bill that would set up an investigation into April's ferry disaster. Park on two separate occasions reached agreements with the ruling Saenuri party on the legislation, but both times the compromise was met with fierce criticism from the victims' families and from within her own party. Park looked to step aside last week by appointing two co-chairmen to lead its emergency committee, but the proposal was quickly batted down by senior party members, who objected to those who were nominated. With Park on the outs, veteran lawmakers with the opposition party have already begun thinking about who her replacement should be and call for someone who is more moderate. Whoever that next leader is will walk into a party torn apart by factionalism and infighting. The party also remains at odds with the ruling Saenuri party at the National Assembly, which has passed 0 bills in recent months because of the ferry bill standoff. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And this just in, a drone has been discovered drifting in waters off Baekneung-do Island. The manless aircraft was found this afternoon on the western side of the border island with North Korea. Last April, a suspected North Korean drone was discovered on the same island. We'll have more details in our later newscast. Moving on to other stories, 64 years ago today, the first shots were fired in one of the most important battles of the Korean War. When the Battle of Incheon ended 4 days later, the course of the Korean War had been altered, giving the advantage back to the South. To honor those that sacrificed their lives and to reflect on what their sacrifices meant, a ceremony was held Monday at the site of the battle. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
On June 25, 1950, the Communist North launches a surprise attack. Within 3 days, North Korean forces have invaded Seoul, and a few days later, North Korea has the majority of the South in its grasp, with the exception of the southern port city of Busan. Weeks pass, and hopes fade, but on September 15th, the Allied forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur, begin to turn the tide. Some 75,000 troops and 261 vessels launch an amphibious invasion. The Battle of Incheon, as is known today, ends in a decisive victory for the United Nations. To commemorate the battle, a ceremony was held where it took place on Monday. More than 2,200 people attended, including Korean War veterans and government and military officials.
If it wasn't for the Battle of Incheon, the Republic of Korea would not exist. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the veterans from all 63 countries.
To provide a better understanding of the historic battle, soldiers from the Korean Navy and Marines staged a reenactment using Aegis destroyer and various air and sea landing crafts. It brought back painful memories for some in attendance, who lived through the battle 64 years ago.
Who knew we would partake in the Battle of Incheon? By doing so, we took back Seoul, but I would really like to be with my fallen comrades, or at least see them in my dreams.
As the saying goes, forgive but don't forget. This ceremony not only serves to pay respect to the fallen, but to show this generation and generations to come of how lucky they are to enjoy the freedoms they have today. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Incheon.
Well, it's time for this week's Industry Insight, and today we're going to talk about the 3D printing industry.
Despite some controversies and worries that the technology would be misused, it has been acknowledged as one of the key technologies of the 21st century.
Right, it's getting a lot faster than it used to take, and there were worries that people might make weapons at home using 3D printers, but then that's just a small price to pay for so many advantages this industry can bring. Korea is one of the many countries looking to expand the scope of the 3D industry, and our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
In the beginning, it was the cool factor that early adopters recognized from 3D printing. And the early players like Stratasys 3D Systems and Shapeways from the US and Japan's DMN were quick to cater to hobbyists and industrialists with an eye on the future. In Korea, those first in line for a 3D printer include researchers in the medical sector looking for innovative ways to treat patients. For example, a local hospital, St. Mary's Hospital of Catholic University, successfully performed an artificial joint treatment earlier this year by using 3D printing to make customized prototypes. And the hospital says it wants to try to expand the technology to make functioning organs in the future. Other large hospitals are racing to patent the three-dimensional printing technology that will be used for skull or dental implants and drug delivery agents in the human body. But despite these promising signs, the 3D printing technology is currently in its infant stages in Korea. Barriers like price and usability are preventing mainstream users from getting their hands on the technology. But some 3D printing companies are trying to change that. Take a look.
3D printers aren't as commonly used by average consumers in Korea because of its huge price tag. The hardware sells at around $2,000 US. In order to break down such economic barriers, 3D developer founded by its parent trading company Mide International Trade launched a leasing and rental program for the public.
We want to lead more people can use the 3D printing technology because we believe this is a very good thing. It is very good for the industrial efficiency. Also, it can help people to get their own customized product. Also, they can change people's lifestyle. So, in order to expand this new technology, we were trying to watch what is the really barrier of the market.
With monthly rental fees set at $35 US and an option to buy at the end of a 2-year contract period, the company says its printer leasing program creates easier accessibility for customers to try the new hardware. The program also assures the machine will continue to operate properly even after its purchase. The company says its customers are not limited to a specific group, but includes manufacturers of toys and jewelry, as well as R&D centers, universities, and ordinary people.
Yeah, for example, we can try to make my own shoes. Maybe somebody can scan my feet, and then maybe we can design. We can change some design to make my own shoes, and then I can just print it.
Another company is also trying to widen the use of 3D printers by making the hardware more easy to use for the average customer. Open Creators, the country's first startup company in the 3D printing industry, says its printer, called the Almond, is by far the easiest printer to use yet. For most people, it takes just the afternoon to get it up and running.
Almond has an auto-leveling function. It checks 9 points of a surface and adjusts the appropriate slope of the bed, eliminating the need for the user to manually attach any nuts and bolts. Also, there's a cooling pen that brings down the temperature of the melted material, which improves printing quality.
And for consumers who are worried about looks, the Almond has both substance and style. It was awarded some of the world's most renowned design awards, including the Red Dot and IDEA Awards. Open Creators says it's working toward a vision to try to create an atmosphere, a culture where every household has a 3D printer in their homes, equivalent to appliances like TVs and vacuum cleaners. The company offers a weekly workshop open to anyone who wants to maximize the utility of its product.
These efforts by the 3D printing industry are expected to open up the technology to the mainstream and pave the way for more specialized applications to become a part of our everyday lives. Incheon, Arirang News.
Face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
The number of visitors from China grows exponentially every year, and not surprisingly, the spending also increases and is said to be having an overwhelming positive effect on the stock prices of Korean firms in the tourism sector. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
In Seoul's bustling shopping district of Myeongdong, it's very easy to find Chinese tourists, and the ever-increasing number of visitors from China is driving strong gains in tourism-related shares. According to the Korea Exchange, the stock prices of 31 firms listed on the local bourse whose brands are popular among the Chinese have risen 51% on average since the end of last year. Contrast that against the 1.1% gain the benchmark Kospi posted over the same period. Because of this, many Korean businesses that used to rely on domestic consumption by Koreans are eyeing these high-spending customers from across the West Sea. In general, Chinese people are much wealthier than they used to be. China's gross national income per capita last year stood at over $6,700. That's more than 5 times higher than in 2003. And due to the popularity of Korean pop culture in China, experts say the country's spending power has a massive impact on Korean companies, particularly those in the entertainment, cosmetic, and clothing industries. And with more Chinese tourists forecast to visit Korea during the upcoming Chinese holiday season early next month and the Incheon Asian Games that kick off this week, expectations are high that they'll give domestic demand in Korea a much-needed boost. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
Now, last week, the Health Ministry announced plans to hike cigarette prices next year, and the price is likely to be increased every time consumer prices go up. The government says the hike will help bring down the smoking rate, but some say it's the government's way to rake in more taxes. Here's our Son Jung-in with this next report.
Along with the government's recent announcement to raise cigarette prices by roughly 80% or some $2, it also said the price of tobacco products would be tagged to the rise of general consumer prices. There would be a 5% hike in tobacco prices every time consumer prices rise 5%.
We are planning to raise cigarette prices in line with the increase in consumer prices. We will hike prices by 5% when consumer prices increase by the same amount.
After the new measure takes effect next year, cigarette prices are expected to rise by 20 to 30 cents every 2 to 3 years, reflecting the yearly consumer price inflation of 2 to 3%. If that's the case, one pack of cigarettes will cost roughly $6 in 10 years from the current $2.40. Policymakers say they want to cut the country's high smoking rate in the most effective way, but others think the government wants to boost tax revenues without the inconvenience of taking it to the National Assembly every time they think a cigarette price hike is necessary. In order to avoid public criticism, experts say the government needs to spend the increased revenues wisely and come up with a long-term plan aimed at enhancing the people's health. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And in other news, fewer and fewer investors are earning profits from company dividends. This as more companies may have piled those profits up as capital reserves. Chaebol.com says just 25 listed companies have had a dividend yield ratio that surpasses 5% on average over the past 3 years. And among those 25, none were conglomerates. This is believed to be partly due to Chaebol's hoarding cash. The National Assembly Budget Office says an
estimated $735 billion were kept as capital reserves by Korean companies in 2012. That's almost 30 times higher than the total in 1990. This comes a month after Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan announced measures intended to induce the nation's largest companies to tap into their reserves to encourage economic growth.
And in sports, the final LPGA major of the season, the 2014 Evian Championship, came to an end in France on Sunday local time. Korean teenage golfer Kim Hyo-ju took home the top prize in dramatic fashion, becoming the third youngest female golfer to win a major. Our sports guru S.J. Lee reports.
19-year-old Kim Hyo-ju is a star in the KLPGA, but after this weekend, she's a superstar in the one that counts, the LPGA. The 20th-ranked Korean started off the event shooting an amazing 10 under 61 in the first round and went into the final round in the lead. Fellow Koreans Chang Han-ah, Heo Mi-jung, and Chen Ha-yeon piled the pressure on Kim, but it was Australia's Kerry Webb, a 7-time major winner, who stormed through in the back nine to take a one-stroke lead going into the 18th hole. But the Korean teenager kept her composure and birdied a tough putt to put her tied for the lead. The pressure was too much for the 39-year-old Webb, who would bogey on the final hole, giving Kim the season's final tour major.
I'm very happy I won. When I finished, I felt out of this world. I felt terrible when I bogeyed on the in-course par 3, but I was able to birdie on what I thought was the toughest hole, so I feel great.
It might be her very first LPGA Tour major win, but given this performance, we'll be hearing a lot more about Kim Hyo-ju in the years to come. S.J. Lee, Arirang News.
Well, she will certainly continue to be the talk of the town for the next couple of days, if not weeks, perhaps.
Right, and now we move on to other sporting events. Right?
In just 4 days, the South Korean port city of Incheon will be filled with some of Asia's greatest athletes.
And they'll be here to take part in the 17th Asian Games, aiming for gold in their respective sports. From South Korea's prospects to North Korea's participation, our Song Ji-sun looks ahead to the event, which kicks off with an opening ceremony on Friday.
The Asian Games is Asia's biggest sports celebration. This year's 16-day event, being held in the South Korean port city of Incheon, will showcase the talents of some 10,000 athletes. North Korean athletes will be among them, and the first wave of their delegation arrived in the South last Thursday. But North Korean cheerleaders will not be making the trip. They were in hand for the Asian Games in Busan back in 2002, but are skipping this year's event after failing to reach an agreement with the South over their accommodations and expenses. Looking ahead to the competition, South Korea is aiming for a top 2 finish in the overall medal count for the 5th consecutive event, with its eye on winning at least 90 golds. China has been a fixture atop the medal count dating all the way back to the 1982 Games. Preliminaries for several sports kicked off over the weekend, and Team South Korea got off to a quick start. The men's football team beat Malaysia 3-0, and the women's squad trounced Thailand 5-0. If you want to catch some of the action in person, the organizing committee announced that only 20% of the overall tickets have been sold as of this Monday. Seats are also still available for Friday's opening ceremony, which starts at 6 p.m. For more information, visit incheon2014ag.com. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now the weather. For that and more, we turn to our Michelle Bach standing by at the Weather Center.
Michelle, we are entering fall, and maybe it's just me, but it seems like we are seeing more mosquitoes these days.
Well, it's not just you, Hyun-kyung, and that's because monsoon season came later this year as well as late summer. And this graph here shows the activities of the mosquito based on the points, and the level should be dropping now, but as you can see, this month we're looking at about 527 points, which is very similar to June and July. So try to wear long sleeves and pants and mosquito repellent if you have any plans to go outside at night, because the bites these days carry more of a punch. And which is also good for you to stay warm because there are large temperature gaps this time of the year, and the lows in some regions are dropping into the teens while we're getting the mild temperatures during the days. Now going over to our temperature readings. Seoul will start off the Tuesday morning at 17 before reaching up to 28 degrees in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan gets up the highs at 28 and 27 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks to 26 while Dokdo hits 22. Mangkeungang is a bit higher at 24 degrees. Now that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. To our viewers in different time zones, have a wonderful day. This has been Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. Hyun-kyung and I will be back same time tomorrow.